This is Principles of Microeconomics, and in today's lecture we are going to concentrate on issues related to the entire economy, how economy is structured into open economy, closed economy, and what are the basic macroeconomic concepts that we use in seeing such classifications and identifications works very well. So the lecture will specifically analyze the factors that determines the overall economic activities by looking at the contributions of different economic agents to see how each economic agent contributes its own quota toward ensuring that the economy is working smoothly. So in the chapter, we are going to try and answer the following questions. How are the international flows of goods and services and assets? Of international flows of goods and assets. What are the differences between the real and the nominal exchange rates? Differences between nominal and the real exchange rate. What is purchasing power parity and how it explains exchange rates, but nominal exchange rates? These are some of the things that we are going to focus, three major things, but the first item is going to take about 2/3 of the slides. In the introduction, remember in Principle of Economics Chapter 1, trade can make everyone better off. We know that with trade, everyone can enjoy because it encourages specialization. Without trade, everyone must produce all goods and services that he wants by himself. But through trade, we focus on producing goods and services that we have comparative advantage, and the goods that we have comparative disadvantage can be obtained in the markets. So trade is very, very essential in microeconomics. The international trade, we know that it can lead to, there can be trade deficits, there can also be trade surplus. Deficit occur when we purchase more than what we sold, then such kind of things lead to deficit. While surplus occur when we sold more than what we purchased, then that's what's called surplus. Then we know how international flows of assets occur, and banks are mainly aiding the flow of assets. With banks, we can make payment to worldwide. From Cyprus, I can send money to Turkey, I can send money to US, I can send money to Europe, I can send money to every part of the world. So banks are indispensable tools that aided transactions, that aided international trade. Without banks, people must take their money to their trade destination for such transactions to occur. Then if trade involves two countries, then there must be a rate by which one country currency is converted with another currency, and such kind of rate is called exchange rate. So going by these basic issues, we can now distinguish between closed and open economies. When we say economy is closed, we're referring to economy that closes its border, economy without engaging in international trade, economy that tries to produce all goods and services that it needs, economy without any trading partner. It's merely an hypothetical nowadays. Most of the countries engage in open trade with the rest of the world, then closed economy now has very less applications in economics. But for the sake of analogy, we need to know in what circumstance that we can say that an economy is an open or is a closed economy. You can take example of countries that were sanctioned from trading with other countries. For instance, if there were some issues with United Nations can lead to sanctions of one country so that its economy will remain closed. All country will boycott to trade with such economy that was experiencing economic sanction. Then such economy can be a hypothetical example of what closed economy. Then there were some economies that are semi-closed. Some goods and services can be openly being traded, while some goods and services there were some restrictions. Then such kind of economy are called semi-closed economy. Then an open economy is an economy that freely interacts with other economics around the world. Economy which freely interacts with other economics from the other economics around the world, then it's called open economy. Example of open economy: Turkey, Cyprus, United States. A lot of countries tend to be open economy because they allow free transaction with the rest of the world. Then how flow of goods and services occur. Before we know how flow of goods and services occur, we need to know what constitutes export and what constitutes exports. When we say exports, we are referring to goods, domestically produced goods and services sold abroad. The goods and services that were produced within the economy, if they were sold abroad, then we say that the amount of money we received constitute our exports, and the quantum of goods and services that were sold are called exported goods, while the imports is nothing but foreign goods and services that is sold domestically. Foreign goods and services that are sold within the economy is called imports. The value of goods and services that are sold within the economy constitute the value of imports, while the goods are imported goods. Then the next export is what? When you subtract exports from imports, the leftover is called net exports, or sometimes we call it trade balance. Balance between export and import, the leftover, the residual, is called trade balance. If export is greater than import, we have positive net exports, and net export will be greater than zero. On the other hand, if import is greater than export, we have negative net export or negative balance of trade. So these are some of the things that we have to keep it in mind. There was some learning activity, try and solve it, please. I'm going to pause the slides in the e-platform format. Then other variables that influence next exports. First is consumer preferences for foreign and domestic goods. If consumers have high taste for foreign goods, then their net exports will likely to be negative. On the other hand, if consumers have high preferences for local goods, then they seem to purchase less of foreign goods. So consumer preferences for foreign and domestic goods are essential determinant of net exports. Prices of goods at home and abroad. If price of goods at home are very low, then that will affect the prices of goods and services abroad. And if, on the other hand, foreign goods are more cheaper than the local goods, then people are more to consume more of foreign goods. So prices of goods and services is factors that also determines the net exports. Then another thing is income of consumer at home and abroad. The higher the incomes of consumer at home, the more they purchase the goods and services made by foreigners and the local goods, while the higher the incomes of consumer abroad, the more they purchases the exported goods and services. So incomes of consumer influences net exports. Then the exchange rate, like I defined exchange rate earlier, the rate at which foreign currency trades for another currency. So if the value of foreign currency is higher, then with very few currency they can obtain more of internationally produced goods, and that will enable such country to have favorable net exports. So exchange rate is one of the factors that influences net exports. Then another thing is transportation costs. The lower the transportation costs, the higher the next exports, and the higher the transportation cost, the lower the next exports. Then another factor is government policies. Some government are implementing anti-trade policy, and they make international trade very cumbersome, and net export will shrink. While other economic with trade-friendly policy, they tend to have positive net exports. So trade policy, government policy is factor that influences the net exports. The next is trade surplus and trade deficits. When net export measures the imbalance in the country terms of trade, in countries' trade in goods and services. Net export, we use net export to measure the imbalance in a country's trade in goods and services. So trade is deficits when an excess of import over exports, when export exceeds, when import exceeds exports, then we see we have trade deficit. And on the other hand, if exports exceeds imports, then we see that there is trade surplus. And a situation whereby exports and the imports are equal, then we see that there is balanced trade. So balanced trade is a situation whereby import is equal to exports. So we can use some graph to demonstrate the exports. These are exports of an economy from 1960 to 2010. Then the other line shows the import of an economy between the same periods, while the gap between the imports and the exports is net exports. And where the two curves intersect, then such periods like 1975, there was a trade balance. 1980, also there is a trade balance. But since 80, there have never been trade balance. Import is greater than exports. While periods prior to 1970, there was positive net exports. Such periods, exports is greater than imports. Between 1960 to 1970, you can see that imports is less than exports. So export is higher. Then how do you measure flow of capital? We see net capital flow as domestic resident purchase of foreign assets minus foreigners' purchase of domestic assets. Such thing is called net capital flow or net foreign investment. Domestic resident purchase of foreign assets minus foreigners purchase domestic assets. That's net capital outflow or net foreign investment. Net capital outflow is also called net foreign investment in economics. And the flow of capital abroad can take two forms. Can take the forms of foreign direct investment, and foreign direct investment is when residents actively manage foreign investment, e.g. some McDonald's that we have and other foreign investments that we have within the economy can be called foreign direct investment, and they're mainly managed by the locals. Then another can be foreign portfolio investment. And foreign portfolio investment occur when the local purchase some stocks and loanable fund to other foreign firms. like bonds. When I purchase bonds in United States, bonds in China, and such kind of things are called foreign portfolio investment. So NCO, that net capital flow, measure the imbalance in the country's trade assets. So when NCO is greater than zero, then capital outlay in foreign asset exceed foreign purchase of domestic assets. And when such kind of things occur, we say that there is negative capital outflow. And on the other hand, when net capital outflow is less than zero, then such kind of thing occur when foreign purchases of domestic asset exceeds domestic purchase of foreign assets. Then there are some variables that influence net capital outflow, just like net export, real interest rate paid on foreign assets, real interest rate paid on domestic assets, perceived risks, holding assets, government policy, and so on and so forth. Then if we really understand what constitutes the net export and the net capital outflow, we can see that the two terms are equal. For instance, accounting identity NCO is equal to NX. Net capital outflow is the same thing as net exports, because they both arise from transactions that affects net export and net also affect the same amount of NCO. So, for instance, when a foreigner purchases a good from US exports increases. Then when foreigner pays with currency or assets, so that the US acquires some foreign asset, causing the NCO decreases. So these two terms are always the same thing. And on the other hand, when US citizen buy foreign goods, then US net export falls. Then that means that the buyer pays with US dollar or assets, so that other countries acquire assets, causing the US NCO to fall. Then there were other things that also need to be explained in this video: savings, investment, and international flow of goods and assets. And we can use always national income identity, where Y is equal to national income is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. The C stands for consumption, I for investment, G for government expenditure, NX net export. The C also consists of what? Autonomous consumption and induced consumption. Autonomous consumption are consumption that is not influenced by income, while induced consumption that influences income. The investment, then the government expenditure. From the accounting identity, if we rearrange taking the CG to the other side of equation, then we have Y minus C minus G is equal to I plus net export. And if we rearrange the terms, we can have S is equal to I plus NX, since saving is equal to income minus consumption minus government spending. So saving is equal to investment plus net exports. So if we know that net exports is equal to net capital outflows, then we can see that S is equal to I plus NCO, since net export is equal to net capital outflows. So when saving is greater than investment, then the excess loanable funds flow abroad in form of positive net capital outflow. Then when saving is less than investment, foreigners are financing some of country's investment, and the net capital outflow is less than zero. Is less than zero. Then these are some of the example of savings in United States from 1950 to 2011. Then investment over the same period, you can see that they almost fluctuates. They have similar trends over the period of time, but between 2000 to 2010, investment is greater than savings. Then corresponding value of net capital outflow is given below, and it shares similar trends with investment and savings, and which shows that it's like the residual of the two. It was in 2000 that the data shows a lower net capital outflow, about 6%. It was negative, minus 6%, and it rose in 2004, 2007, 8, then in 2010, still negative below zero, but about -2 or so, something like that. So over this period, the economy is experiencing what is called negative capital outflow, and that's very, very source of concern to such economy. So almost that's the end of the slides. Okay, there is nominal and the exchange rate. We know that for transactions to occur that involves two countries, then we have to express the country currency in terms of another country's currency, and such exchange that determines the value between two currencies is called exchange rate. And the exchange rate is the rate at which country's currency trade for another country's for another country. So we express all exchange rate as foreign currency per unit of domestic currency. And what determines the exchange rate of one currency is the economic performance. If the economy is doing well, its exchange rate will be greater than the economy which is not doing well. And sometimes exchange rate appreciates and other times depreciates. For instance, since December 2016, Turkish lira is depreciating, while the United States is appreciating. But of recent, last week or so, United States dollar depreciates a little. So appreciation is the strength, is nothing but strengthening or an increase in the value of currency as measured by amount of currency it can buy, while depreciation is the weakening or decrease in the value of currency as measured by the amount of currency that such country can buy. Then real exchange rate is when you subtract the influence of price changes. Nominal exchange rate, we are not interested in the rate of price changes. So real exchange rate is the rate at which the goods and services of one country trade for another goods and services of another. I mean, the rate at which the goods and services of one country trade for goods and services of another. So it involves deflating the influence of prices. So the formula we use in calculating the real exchange rate is E, that's the exchange rate, times the price of domestic goods all over the price of foreign goods. P, the price of domestic goods, P with star, P with asterisk is the price of what? Foreign goods. So for instance, a Big Mac cost 20.50 US dollar, 400 yen in Japan. So the exchange rate is 120 per dollar. Then E times P is equal to 120 yen times 2.50 Big Mac. Then that gives 300 yen per US Big Mac. To compute the real exchange rate is we divide $300 yen by 300 yen per 300 US Big Mac, all by 400 yen per Japanese Big Mac. Then that gives 0.75 Japanese Big Mac. So interpreting the real exchange rate is equal to 0.75 Japanese Big Mac per US Big Mac. So you can see that real exchange rate is nothing but try to capture the influences of price variation between one country to another in terms of expressing how one country currency can be used to purchase goods that is produced by another country. So in essence, we have treated a lot of things as far as this video is concerned. We have seen how the economy works. We mix distinctive classification between open economy and closed economy. We have seen how flow of payment can be aided with by banks, because trades that involve one country with another, payments need to be made, and the media through which payments were made is banks. We have seen what influence the net exports, and we are made to understand the equality between net capital outflows and net exports. We are seeing the influence of the exchange rates in determining the value of one country's currency with another. We also use real exchange rates to see how we can deflate how can remove the influence of prices, relative prices between one country to another, and how such relative prices can affect transactions between those two countries involved with. So this is very, very essential aspect of what microeconomics, because it can enable one to understand why one country's currency is of high value while another countries are of low value. For instance, the pound sterling in UK, the United States dollar, the euro, they have relatively high value compared to countries' currency in most third world countries, because the economic performance is entirely different. And such kind of things can be measured by what net exports. A country with positive net exports may likely to have higher value of its currency, because foreigners might have higher tastes for goods and services it produces, and it's going to export a lot of goods and services to those countries with negative terms of trade. So this is very, very essential aspect that's used in classification, whether the economy is advanced or whether the economy is less advanced, third worlds, medium income countries, and so on and so forth. So that's the end of the video. Thank you for having you. Bye-bye.